Welcome to Stories of Brisco
It's
and
my turn
Bradshaw.
here.
I would be Bradshaw. That talkative person down there is Oklahoma's favorite son, the Chickasaw native, the Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And we have got a gem today, part 2 of a series on the Welch family dynasty. What we're thinking is maybe either the greatest family in wrestling history, certainly one of the greatest families in wrestling history. There certainly is about 4 million of Welches and Fullers when you combine them all together. And we've got our favorite historian, our wrestling's greatest historian, Mr. Tony Richards. Tony, welcome back to part 2.
All right, guys. Thank you. Well, they certainly were the biggest and most influential families in professional wrestling, for sure. When you count up the Welches, the Fullers, the Goldens, the Fields, and everybody else.
Everybody, the Jarrett, just throw the Jarrett's in there too.
Oh yeah.
I still think Jarrett's related to him somehow there. But Tony, what positive feedback we've been getting here, man? We went way, way, way back before TV, way back in the beginning of this wonderful business that we all love, and of course, the Welches were on the Trail of Tears. They were marched from Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, all the way out to Oklahoma, settled in the great town of Sallisaw, Oklahoma. Home of Mae Young, by the way, too, and a couple other superstars, and ended up in this business here. And we were getting to the root of how they got into business. Now we've gone all over that, the Depression days, all that. Now we're coming up to the days that people are probably a little bit more familiar with, the TV days. So let's get going here. And Tony, your notes once again are immaculate and fantastic to read. Reminds me of so much of when I started in the business. Because a lot of those Tennessee guys, they ended up in Oklahoma working for Leroy McGurk, after they finished up there in Tennessee with the Fuller. So let's get rolling on this thing, John.
Sure. Yep, we go back and cover just a couple things we talked about in episode 1. One was a tag team match that I went back and looked up, and I couldn't put my mind on the date, but it was the October 2nd, 1936 match that Doc Soprolis booked for Morris Siegel with all 4 guys in the ring at the same time. I actually posted it on Twitter today and copied you guys, but Milo Steinborn was in that match. And so was Whisker Savage. And Milo Steinborn is actually the guy that suggested they could get a little bit more mileage out of it if they called it an Australian tag team match.
Wow.
And that of course, is Dickie Steinborn's father, who was ended up being a longtime promoter in Orlando for Eddie Graham. And they used the Australian thing just to kind of make it sound more foreign, more exotic, more different. And then, Jerry, to your point, in our first show, that's when the Kangaroos came along later, and it really took on some momentum then because those guys were from Australia, Al Costello and Roy Hefferman. So, yeah.
And Tony, too, I mean, you brought up a name there, Milo Cyborg, one of the most respected guys in our business, and was one of those old strongman type guy, that came from the old country and immigrated over to the United States, but his reputation was in a strongman. Can you tell us a little bit about Milo? I know we're getting off the subject, but I'd just like to enlighten people a little bit on Milo.
Absolutely. He was a carnival strongman, came over here. That's how he kind of made his living, was he figured out how to work out, how to eat back in the 20s. And he worked the carnival circuit and the at shows doing strongman acts and also taking on challengers from the crowd. Got into pro wrestling, wrestled down in Texas quite a bit, and then worked around some of the early territories. Finally settled in Orlando to promote Orlando, who for Cowboy Latrell, actually, who we're also going to talk about a little bit on a follow-up. And Milo owned a gymnasium there in Orlando, and he only took certain people. I think he only took about 20 people at a time into his gym, and he worked with them. And, of course, he was Jerry Oates' father-in-law. He was Dick Steinborn's dad. And
Milo was the original NXT.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, he trained guys.
In Orlando.
In Orlando. He trained guys, worked with guys. And again, he would it was like a gym membership, but you had to be accepted. And he only had 20 to 25 people at one time. Wow. He was very exclusive in his gym. So
Now, was
quite
he
a couple.
training just for wrestling, or was he training for strongman, or what was he training for?
All the above. I think he trained even a few boxers, but he trained the wrestlers. He trained strong bodybuilder type people and taught them how to do the weights where they'd look the best and what to eat and all that kind of stuff.
That
So
was such a
John,
commonality back then, wasn't it, Tony, with the strongman and the carnivals into wrestling? Because a lot of these guys, that was the migration, was that they come in first and they're bending bars, they're doing all kind of crazy strength things. Then they get into wrestling because it's, I guess, a little more lucrative.
yeah, and they were doing later on in later years. They were holding back trucks and pulling semis and all that kind of stuff. Things that Joe LeDuc was doing
yeah.
in the 70s.
Well, Joe LeDuc was actually trained a little bit under that strong man with Milo. When Joe first came to Florida, Milo was still around kicking. And Joe, John, you would have loved this guy. I mean, he was one of these old timers that loved telling stories. I mean, he would tell strong man stories, he'd tell carnival stories. So when we go to Orlando, everybody would just really enjoy going over there because you'd trap Milo back in the locker room area and just asked him one question, and before long you were on. You didn't want to leave the conversation because Milo was so engaging in it. But what a guy he was! What a personality! That's just another one of the great personalities in our business. One of the great personalities that the Welches helped develop. So let's jump back into the Welches here.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow up on Cowboy Latrell. July 1st, 1940, that was that boxing match we talked about with Jack Dempsey. And Dempsey was 45 years old at the time.
Wow.
He knocked out Cowboy in the 4th round. I think it's pretty common knowledge that it was all a work and an angle to set up the whole thing with Dempsey as a referee in a Cowboy match. The two got into a shoving match and then had the boxing match. And and this is something we're going to talk about today too. But Latrell took a legit beating. I mean,
he did.
The ending was predetermined, but it was anything but fake. I mean,
now I used to ask Cowboy all the time if it was a work, and he up until the times where he was sickly, he always never would admit it was a work. When guys would tell me it was a work, but that picture. And we got to dig that picture up, John, out of the archives. I'm sure our man Dave Silva can find it. It's one of the most famous boxing pictures of all time for Jack Dempsey, right, Tony?
Yeah, that's right. And 2 weeks after that, Jack Dempsey was in a match where he knocked
picture
out
of Dempsey and Latrell, right?
Yeah, getting knocked through the ropes there.
Yeah.
Dempsey knocks out Bull Curry in Detroit in the 2nd round of another boxer-wrestler match.
Now, the boxer-wrestler match there, too. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. And so it only took 2 rounds for Bull Curry to go down. So he wasn't.
Cowboy was a little bitty guy. Curry was a pretty big, salty guy.
he wasn't going to take as much whipping as Cowboy was willing to take.
Yeah.
We talked about Count Rossi a little bit in our first show. And one of John mentioned this about the cage match, which was a chicken wire match against Jack Bloomfield, June 25th, 1937 in Atlanta. And also, Rossi worked there in Nashville for Roy. But when the Green Knight got over, the competing promoter that promoted the heavyweights there in Nashville came up with his own masked wrestler gimmick called the Black Panther. And they used Rossi as his manager. And Rossi, so that kind of made Rossi one of the first managers in professional wrestling.
Wow.
Let's see. So the Florida deal, Roy exiting Florida. We talked about that with Cowboy Latrell, and I looked up I remembered a story. Excuse me.
And guys, here is the one of the pictures. Is that the picture you're talking about where Dempsey knocks him?
Yes, sir.
That's Cowboy Latrell being being
AO'd.
Now, I mean, I from what I've read, it sounds like it was a work. But why did Dempsey beat him up so bad? Was that just kind of to show him something? Was there a little heat there, or was it to make it look real? Was there a reason behind it?
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit, talking about Nashville again. But I think then in the 40s particularly, blading was not really a common thing yet. And so guys did hard ways. And I think to make sure that people believed in the authenticity of the match, guys were willing to take a beating. And so Latrell was notorious for getting beat up in his matches and in the wrestling matches too.
It's so funny. People talk about boxing, like Primo Canera was, the great, huge heavyweight, had a bunch of matches with both Bronco Nagursi and with Jim Londos. There's the rumor, Tony, that Primo may have may have never had a legit boxing match. I'm sure he had some, but the majority of his matches were apparently works. I mean, I'm talking about boxing matches that you bet on were works. So a lot of boxing back then was not much different from wrestling in the fact that a lot of it was a work.
Except the punches.
Well, of course, yeah. You can say the same thing about wrestling.
Absolutely. Talking about Luttrell and Florida and Roy exiting Florida. So Tampa in specificity. I remembered a story that Frankie Kane told about that. And so
the great Mephisto, Frankie Kane.
Yep. I went and got my Frankie Kane book and looked it up. And sure enough, he did tell a story about it. I want to relate. It says, Roy told me that he sold Tampa to Luttrell on a handshake in July of 1949, but Cowboy never paid. Eddie Graham told me a little about Roy's time in Florida, too. He said Roy could have had all of Florida if he wanted. He could have had Tampa, Jacksonville, Miami, Orlando, but the buildings didn't have air conditioning, so during the hot season when kids were out of school, people didn't go to the matches. That's why promoters before Roy would shut down during the summer. When Roy went in, he ran Tampa year-round, but he wouldn't run the small towns or the spot shows. Later, when I went in to box for Cowboy, a Jewish guy sent me on the road and gave me $100, which was quite a bit of money in those days. While I was walking down the street, here comes crazy Cowboy Luttrell honking his horn, asking me to get in the car. Sometimes somebody had told Cowboy that Roy was in Tampa to ask for his money for selling Tampa. And if he didn't get it, he was going to run opposition to Cowboy. I didn't know Roy Welch at that time, and I didn't know Cowboy, and I didn't know what they were talking about. He wasn't so much talking to me as he was talking to himself. And Cowboy's over in the other seat muttering, that son of a bitch is in town telling everybody what he's going to do to me. Well, we're going to find out. And so Frankie says, Cowboy, what are you talking about? He said, you'll see, just count the bodies when they fall. How many people are you going to fight? Oh, he's probably got all of his brothers with him. I really don't care. Roy was staying at the Bayview Hotel on Jackson Street. Cowboy pulled his gun out from under the seat, put his jacket on, stuck that gun down there in his belt. And we walked into the lobby, and he says, now you sit right here, punk, and watch this. He used to call me the punk, which was a word that was used for somebody new in the wrestling business in those days. Sit down here, punk. I don't want you to get killed. But Jimmy, which Jimmy Alt is Frankie Kane's real name, but if you hear me scream for you, I want you to come running. There was a long flight of steps leading upstairs from the lobby. Cowboy goes up the steps. I heard Cowboy banging on the door. I heard some arguing, some fighting, and some shouting, then some cussing and some hollering. And then some guy comes running down the steps in his shorts and an undershirt with Cowboy close behind with a big hook-billed knife, one of those carpet-cutting knives. You son of a bitch, you lie and come in and try to take my damn territory. I'll shoot every Welch around here. Come back here. The guy behind the desk hollered, I'm calling the cops. Roy was out the door and long gone. Cowboy looked at me and said, we better get the hell out of here. It kind of scared Cowboy that he might get arrested, so we left the hotel. Later, when we were told that Roy had gotten airsick during the flight down to Tampa, he was not a fan of flying. As a matter of fact, he was scared of flying. As soon as he got to the hotel, he laid down in the bed to sleep off the flight. Needless to say, that was the end of Roy Welch trying to collect his money from Cowboy Luttrell. And that's the story of how Cowboy got the Florida territory.
Wow.
Now, where did that come from, Tony?
Frankie Kane's book.
Frankie Kane and Mephisto.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great story.
I recommend that book, John, Raising Kane. And who wrote that?
That's Scott Teal and Frankie
Teal.
Kane. Yeah.
Okay.
You think that's legit?
I don't know. We'll ask Ron what he thinks.
Yeah.
Right. Because you never know. I mean, most of the time when you hear stories that are old, there's kernels of truth on both sides, and you kind of figure out, in the middle what it is.
Yeah.
And once again, Tony, as I asked you, the reputation of Roy is a badass reputation.
That's why I wondered about that.
Yeah. I don't know it's always just kind of been a mystery to me why he just left, which that would make sense that he sold it to Cowboy, which Cowboy was running out of Chattanooga. And Cowboy is how Eddie Graham and Roy got hooked up together, because Eddie kind of broke in there in Tennessee, and Eddie's going to be prominent here in the 50s, working in the 40s and the 50s, working with Roy. So I could see Roy saying, "Yeah, I'll sell it to you. Just pay me X whenever you can or whatever." And then time goes by and he never gets any money. He goes to collect, and but I don't know if he was afraid of flying and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and what Jerry was saying, I agree with. Roy was a super tough guy. Apparently, everybody that talks about him talk about how tough he was. And I guess I don't know, Cowboy Luttrell, same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just interesting. Try to dissect history to see what's true and what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad we've got somebody who was back there then when it happened, but like all stories. Scott did tell me that one of the things that he would do before he would put stories in his books is he would interview a guy and let them tell him the story. He'd wait about a month and call back and said, "Hey, I didn't get my notes on that. Can you tell me that story again?"
Right.
And he'd do that, and then he'd do it again, like a third time. And he said one of the things about Frankie was it always matched.
Yeah.
And the story was the same every time. He said a lot of guys, especially with Don Fargo, he struggled with getting down to it, because Don just naturally kayfabed him,
and before the internet, guys got away with doing that.
Yeah, it was part of the business.
Tell guys this happened in Amarillo, or this happened in Oklahoma City, or this happened there, and there's no way of knowing if it's true or not unless you knew people there, And now you're able to fact check people so much better.
And storytelling was an entertaining part of the business.
Of course it was. And guys love telling stories. It was part of our heritage.
Absolutely.
Things that make it so great.
They rode thousands and thousands of miles in cars together, and so they had to keep themselves entertained. So guys, just figured out how to tell good stories and, add to them and augment them and all kinds of stuff. And then if you tell something several times, you start believing that's the way it happened.
Yeah. And back in those days, if you're a good storyteller, you never had a problem getting a ride to a town. I mean, I remember
That's
that.
right.
Yeah, let's take him because he can spin a good yarn. Okay, well, let's get him.
Yeah, because literally back in the day, if you had a guy that would just sit there in the car and wouldn't say anything, you might just drop him off the town and not take him anywhere else because he's boring.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the town promoters around the Tennessee territory. We talked about them, that they're not family members, but Roy did treat them like family. I mean, he cultivated this group of guys that were with him for a whole lot of his promotion career. One of them we talked about was Hot Gillum, who is special to me because he was the Paducah promoter in the 1930s and the 1940s. And he hooked up with Roy early on. Paducah was the first town that Roy went to as a wrestler when he migrated south. And he met up with Hot, and they ended up having a great relationship together. And
how did Hot Gillum's name develop? Because that wasn't his real name, right?
Right. His name was Waddy Powell Gillum. And I'm not quite sure.
Name.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how Hot came about. Like, what a horrible name, right? But I'm not sure exactly what the origins of the Hot, part of it are. But what's interesting is they were so close and so tight in the 30s that Roy said, "Hey, I got this idea to put this territory together of this network of towns." Not sure what he would have called it back then. I don't know if he would have said network, but it was essentially the bare bones of the Tennessee territory, the Paducah, Kentucky, the Caruthersville, Missouri, the Cape Girardeau, Missouri, the Dyersburg, Tennessee, those original towns that he started running in the 30s during the Great Depression. And he told Hot, he said, "I'm going to need a front man because I'm a wrestler, so I'm going to need a front man, and I want to offer somebody half of this thing if you will be my front guy." And Hot said, "Well, I'd like to do it, Roy, but I just don't have the money right now to invest in something like that, and I'm going to have to pass for now, but I might come back later and take you up on it." So Hot saves up his money and comes back to Roy right about 1939. And he says, "Hey, I've saved up a little bit of money, and I can give this to you for the points in the promotion and all that. And Roy goes, well, shoot, you're too late. 2 weeks ago, I took on a boy named Nick Goulas, and he's going to be my front man in Nashville, and we're going into Nashville, and he's going to have half of the operation. So Hot missed out on his opportunity just by that much.
And did Hot do anything else with territories? Did he ever buy into another territory?
He didn't. He was a town promoter for Roy up till 1950 in Paducah. And then Roy changed, and I don't know exactly what happened there. There's a huge article in the Paducah Sun in 1949 where Hot is announcing his retirement on New Year's Eve of 1949. And Jack Keller, who owned a lot of entertainment things in Paducah, he owned the movie theaters, he owned the amusement park where the rides were, and he was an entertainment broker or agent there in town. And he started bringing in pro wrestling, and Roy's office started using him as their town promoter. And they had matches in his movie theater in downtown Paducah. And so Hot then moved back to Tennessee for a little while, and he started promoting Jackson, Tennessee for Roy.
And Nick Goulas, where did he come from that he ended up buying half the territory?
Yep, he worked for Chris Jordan. So Chris Jordan was another wrestler that Roy formed a relationship with in West Texas. He was involved in the Jim Londos training with Dutch Mantell, and he worked there in Amarillo and West Texas. And then he migrated, like Roy, he migrated back east looking for places where he could do what Dutch Mantell was doing, which was putting this little network of towns together that were not big enough for the big-time guys to send heavyweights to, but were small enough that he could carve out a niche. So Jordan basically ended up taking over the entire state of Alabama. I sent you guys a picture of his business card where he, at one point in the late 30s, he was growing so fast that the cards at the back of his card, the towns he was promoting, they started writing them on his business card. And actually, New Orleans is written to the side of the list of towns because his wife wrote that one in. He also had, on that card, he had written Mexico City. And so he had started booking talent to Salvador Luderoth in Mexico City. So he was quite a promoter. And Roy worked for Chris in Birmingham and New Orleans and saw what Chris was doing. And I think that gave Roy the encouragement to go ahead and put the fuel on growing his territory. So in the process of working for Jordan, he met Nick. And Nick was promoting some towns like Sheffield and a couple of others. And Jordan had two guys in his office that were his proteges. One was Joe Gunther and one was Nick Goulas. And he favored Gunther because Gunther was a wrestler. And so when Chris Jordan got sick in 1937 and eventually died in 1940, he left his company to Joe Gunther. And that was when Nick was kind of a free agent then. And so he went to work for Roy.
And what was Nick's upbringing as into wrestling?
That was pretty much it. He just worked for Jordan.
So he just worked for Jordan. That was his job. And then he just migrated up the corporate ladder or migrated up until he ended up getting his own territory. And,
what was it? What was his specialty? I mean, everybody has a specialty in the business.
Yeah, he was an outstanding town promoter. And he's really going to come into his own here in this show we're going to do today, because when Roy buys the state of Alabama, Nick is a natural because he had worked in Jordan's office for all those years and he knew all those Alabama towns. So he really became a valuable partner when Roy had his Alabama expansion. And Nick actually took over the promoting of Birmingham because he, that was where he used to live.
Tony, I'm sorry, it's so interesting to me, this territories before TV, because let's talk about Roy Welch if we can, please, just like at Paducah and the different cities that he had. How was he running angles? I mean, was he running angles through newspapers? How was he running angles? And were the angles, like, we running the same angles in every single town? Or were we running angles in like your big city, and then that storyline would get throughout the rest of the towns? And if it did, how did that storyline get there?
Yeah, so let's take the Green Shadow, for example. So a Green Shadow would work, 6 months in Nashville or maybe 10 weeks. and they'd run the storyline and angles, which would get covered in the newspaper. Sometimes they would be able to do some radio to support that. In some towns, the main event was broadcast on the radio. Some towns, the entire match card was broadcast on the radio. And so that was the primary way. And then just in the arenas, they were giving people reasons to come back for the return matches by doing angles and storylines that the fans wanted to come back and see. Man, next week is going to be the week the Green Shadow loses his mask. They'd run that whole thing for 9 or 10 weeks. Then they'd go to Knoxville and run that same thing for 9 or 10 weeks. By the time it cooled off and got blown off, then they'd come back. And so then by the time the Green Shadow got unmasked in Nashville and Knoxville, he had a whole nother run through the Tennessee territory with his mask back on.
Right.
And so
it was kind of a hub and spoke model, same as television, where you'd run your big shows on a Saturday or a Monday or whenever that big show is, and then you'd run your live events, your house shows, based off that storyline off the big show. You're just using newspaper and radio to get that word out from the big show for all of the, like what we would call later house shows.
Right. And they would do, they would program book towns rather than the territory. So what Roy would do is he would have 4 to 6 guys. Now, those 4 to 6 guys might work all their angles and storylines in Paducah, and he might have another 4 to 6 guys working their storylines all in Blytheville, Arkansas. Then he might have another 4 to 6 guys working theirs in Caruthersville, Missouri. And then they were just every 6 weeks or so, they were rotating. And then the Paducah guys would go to Caruthersville and they'd work their 6-week program. The Caruthersville guys would go to Paducah and work their 4 to 6 week program. And they were just constantly revolving around. And they did.
Were those the only cities they were working, like Paducah? I mean, if you're a Paducah guy, you had a bicycle to towns that you were
Well,
running,
you probably had,
support.
you probably had your towns for the week,
Yeah.
right? So you had maybe Paducah, Madisonville, Caruthersville, and then after 6 weeks or whatever, your towns for the week would change, right? And then you'd go, and when the territory gets as big as it gets, that the roster expands exponentially, not only because you need more guys to cover all the territory, but the match card is deeper. It's no longer, a tag match and 2 single matches. Now you got, singles matches and a tag match, and you might have, maybe 4 matches, sometimes 5 on a card.
Do you have any idea how deep the roster was? Because we know through history, looking at the old card, that the card were, 8 to 10 guys, sometimes even 6 guys on a card. Do you know how big a roster was like for a Paducah group?
Yeah, back in the 30s, I mean, Roy probably was employing maybe 40 guys.
Wow.
Wrestlers, 40 wrestlers.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah,
That's
maybe.
big territory. Well,
Something
Roy was obviously a very good businessman. But was he also a very creative guy? I mean, the Green Shadow was obviously one of the best characters created, one of the great heels, great creation. Did Roy have a booker, or did he do all this himself?
Well, he had guys who helped him, obviously. I mean, I'm pretty sure Pat had input into the Green Shadow as well, as Roy. I mean, he had his trusted, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 guys around him that were constantly helping. But most of that stuff from 1935 to 1937 through the 40s and into the 50s is pretty much him.
Because
was Herb involved in that? I'm sorry, Don.
I'm sorry. One more question.
Okay, go.
And because Tony, you know this very well, dealing with CEOs. CEOs are usually business people or creative people. They're usually one of the two. It's very, very rare to find one that's both. Rory was obviously very good with business, but it sounds like he was also one of these rare guys that was very good with creative. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Yeah, I think he was. But just like all creative people, you got a shelf life. And so I'm sure as time went on, and I think most of the Welch brothers were this way, they were much more interested in promoting than they were in the creative.
Right.
Like they were all the brothers started gravitating as the territory grows. They start going out and seeing where not only can they work the matches, but they can run the town and make the money by being the person who runs the town. And so as their career goes on, they get much more into promoting than they do, and they get guys to come in and help with the booking. I mean, they're like you say, Roy was a great businessman, so he knew how to leverage his resources.
Yeah, and Jerry, I'm sorry, I cut you off about the question you had about Herb.
I was just I was Herb when Roy was doing all this. Like what was Herb? Or like could he have been the booker, or was he just along with?
I mean, based on what I know about him or what I've been able to dig up, Herb again was much more interested in the business side, so he started training guys. And he started, later on, as his career starts winding down in the 60s, he starts promoting towns like Blytheville and Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and towns like that, rather than being much involved in the storylines or the creative. He was much more interested in getting guys, bringing them and breaking them into the business and running towns.
I mean, Rory's setting this up. To me, it just seems like this guy is such a special guy. Dutch Mantell, the original Dutch Mantell, was the same way. It seems like. I mean, Roy Welch to me is a real pillar that future wrestling territories and generations were built off of. I mean, it's really this guy was light years ahead of his time. He's almost like Jim Barnett, who we discussed in a previous series, which was one of my favorites of all time, who changed wrestling. Roy seems to change wrestling.
He changes wrestling for sure in the towns that are not the major cities. He created the Southern wrestling style and the Southern wrestling loop of.
He created AAA baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I don't know if it was last week or our private conversation, but we were talking about the Welches, how they promoted the towns and everything, and I'm sorry, I forgot where I was going with it, but how they promoted the towns and how they were able to pull people in. The Southern style of wrestling was a salesman type. That's where I was going. This was a salesman type wrestler, where the Northeastern guys were big brawlers and stuff like that. That was a Welch thing then, right?
Yeah. Roy, and there were other guys that were kind of figuring out how to do that too. But Roy's big differentiating point was light heavyweights and faster action and real hot heels and angles that drew people back week after week after week. I mean, that was what he learned. That's what he learned from Dutch Mantell.
Okay, so how did he know comparison? I mean, did he work that style? Did he go up to the North any and witness any of that style of work?
Yeah, he worked for about 3 years. He worked for Al Haft. Okay. So he worked in Ohio for Al Haft, it was pretty much a heavyweight territory. The same thing happened to Dory Funk Sr. He went to work for Haft and tried to break in with Kohler, and he wasn't big enough. And so all the guys said, man, you need to go to Texas, because most of the places in the South are the junior heavyweights, right? And you'd get over in Texas. So he goes to Texas, and the rest is history. And the Southwest Junior Heavyweight Championship was one of the premier titles in Texas for years, just like the Southern Junior Heavyweight Championship was the premier title until 1975 in the Tennessee territory. They didn't change the name of it to heavyweight until 1976 or 75 or 76. Yeah. I did some research. I was looking for it. I'm glad I found it. So I did some research on how many wrestlers were in the business in various decades. So from 1910 to 1920, you had anywhere from 50 to 75 guys in the wrestling business, and
total nationwide, right?
Yeah, and got to remember that World War I was going on, and anytime there's a war, you don't have as many people because people are in the military or getting enlisted or whatever. From 1920 to 1930, 75 to 100. From 1930 to 1940, 125 to 175 guys are in the business. And probably
is that just basically USA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course these are the Depression years, 1930 to 1940. And probably 25 of those are probably working for Roy. Something like that. And then 1940 to 1950, after World War II, 175 to 250 guys are in the wrestling business. Then in 1950, when television is hot and the Dumont network is going, and it is an on fire business during the 50s, 400 to 600 guys in the wrestling business.
Wow.
It jumps fourfold right away.
Then 1960 to 1970, 800 to 1,200 guys are in the wrestling business. Then from 1970 to 1980, this is the peak, 1,200 to 1,500 guys in the wrestling business, which in 1980, all the offices started closing down in the National Wrestling Alliance.
And if you talk to every one of them, they were really over, and they're hanging from the rafters for all their matches.
That's right.
And they were all champions.
That's right.
Then it starts to recede. 1980 to 1990, there's 1,200 to 800 guys. So it's now going backwards because you got territories closing down, booking offices closing down. And then from 1990 to 2000, you got anywhere from 800 to 650 guys working.
And right now, is it about 15,000?
Probably. I don't know. I didn't do it past 2,000, but it's definitely, you can see where the cards were expanding. You had more matches, more guys were working, there were more offices. And then from 75 on, it starts going the other way.
That's interesting. It's really interesting to see how many people are in the wrestling business. But again, for those that are listening, that doesn't include those in Mexico or Canada or Europe or Japan.
Right, that's correct.
Other territories that were thriving as well.
Yeah, and wrestling didn't even hit Japan until the 50s. So
that's right, early 50s with
Ricky Dozan.
Ricky Dozan when we got there and had the big Fez angle and some great things with Ricky Dozan.
Yeah. Mike Maroney. He was an interesting guy in Roy's circle. He was about almost 6 feet tall, 196 pounds when he was a wrestler. And he was Mike Maroney, Pat Maroney, and he lived in Blytheville, Arkansas, about 1934. He stayed there the rest of his life. He ran a machine shop, and he was a cabinet maker. He was also a Mason and an American Legion member, which helped him with his sponsorship of wrestling in the town. And the funny thing about Mike Maroney is that he used to tell fans at the wrestling matches, hey, come on by my machine shop and I'll let you in on this stuff about the wrestling business. And I only charge you a couple bucks for it. And so people would show up at his machine shop and he'd sit down on a stool and start saying, now this Herb Welch guy, you guys know who he is. And everybody go, oh, yeah, we like Herb Welch. Well, he's married and got 2 kids. And, this other guy and all that. And he would tell them that he wouldn't tell them nothing about the wrestling business. He'd just tell them, a few things about the wrestlers and charge them a couple dollars.
Wow.
What a typical worker.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me back in the days where in Oklahoma when I was starting out, there was this guy, Jaime Varner, that had a machine shop. He was one of Leroy's guys that Leroy trusted. Him and Wayne Martin would get together all the time on a Tuesday afternoon, and we go over to the shop and sit there and listen to those old timers spin those yards like that. I was just so amazed. I'd sit there with my mouth wide open every time I got invited to one of those things. But that goes back to that. I mean that's so wonderful to hear that story.
Yeah. He would tell them, Roy's got a dog and his name is Luke, and
and he tells them basically he's gonna smarten them up to the wrestling business, and all he does is tell them about his dog, the dog food, the dog's name, his wife, and his kids, and that's all. That is just fantastic.
Roy's got a son named Buddy. He's gonna be a wrestler one of these days. That'd be $2 for you.
And you know what's so great about that is these old guys were so good. They could do that, and people could leave and go, man, that was awesome.
My gosh, I can't believe I know that Roy's got a son.
All this stuff about these guys, it's the greatest thing ever. They tell everybody, and you're giving them nothing.
I've told it. I don't think I've ever told it with you guys, but I've told this story before where I used to go to the ICW matches all the time, the PAFO here when they ran here in Paducah. I got to be friends with the guy who hauled the ring. So I was standing back in the back of the National Guard Armory in Paducah talking to him one night. He goes, well, I'm not supposed to say anything, but I just want you to know, Randy and Lanny are brothers. I said, they are? Like, I mean, my mouth fell open. I'm like, what? Because on television, they hated each other, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, they are? He goes, oh, yeah, they're brothers. Nobody's supposed to really know about it. Well, in about 2 weeks, that was Ronnie Garvin's big angle. He came out on television, which the guy must have known that. That's why he knew it wasn't going to be any big deal telling me that Ronnie Garvin exposed them as brothers on television in about 2 weeks. But I was standing there going, oh, my gosh, I drove home that night thinking I really know something, you know?
Yeah. There was an old saying that it goes along with this story and an old wrestling business back in the day. You know, if you want a story to get out, you don't worry about telegraph, tell a wrestler. You know,
That's right. That's right.
There was another fella named Colonel Herb Langston.
Yeah.
And I sent you guys some pictures that Colonel Herb was in. Mike Maroney's in a couple of those too. But he booked. We talked about that. Did Roy have anybody helping out? Well, Herb did some booking. He did some booking in some of the towns he ran. He eventually ended up running Dyersburg for Roy. He also ran Jackson, Tennessee. And he ran, both Mike Maroney and Herb Langston were guys that if a town needed a promoter for a short amount of time, or if Roy hadn't found somebody yet, or maybe somebody didn't want to do it anymore, or whatever, he'd send Maroney or Langston there, and they'd run the town until he found somebody. I mean, that's that was pretty much, you know, how close they kind of were to Roy in his circle. He promoted Jackson from 54 to 77 after Hot Gillum had passed away.
And Maroney, his wife was involved in this somehow too, right?
Yeah. Nettie May. Nettie May was his wife, and she, you know, took tickets and sold, you know, concessions and all kinds of stuff. But you know, everybody, it was always been a family business, you know. So these guys that were promoters, their kids swept the armory, and you know, Jeff Jarrett talks all the time. That was his first job in wrestling, was sweeping up after the matches. And, you know, it's just always the way it's been. You leveraged all the cheap labor you could find, which mostly lived in your house. So let's see. Nick.
Now, before we leave Maroney here, I probably I jumped here, but he defeated a young Hackett Smith, or what?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. I got to find where I had that. I'd already turned to my Nick Goulas page.
Talk about Maroney.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He so in the 30s, he was wrestling in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he beat this wrestler named Young Hackenschmitz at the Armory.
What the original?
No. It was one of those Jack Pfeffer names. You know, that was sounded Young Hackenschmitz. And so he also promoted one of the first steel cage matches in Caruthersville, Missouri, coming from that match we talked about with Count Rossi. He put chicken wire around the ring.
But this was they called this a steel cage match, did they? Or did they call it
No, they called it a fence match.
Fence match,
yeah. They call it a fence match, and they would string up the chicken wire, unroll it, you know, and use some barrier stands to hold it up.
That's Texas. That's Texas for you, because that happened in Texas.
No, Georgia was the first.
Georgia Count Rossi.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Count Rossi.
You can't give us credit for that.
No, I get blamed for that one.
They got the first tag team match, though.
That's right. The first tag, the Texas Tornado match, what it became.
So a couple other guys here. Nick Goulas had to go into the military during World War II, and he went into the Navy during the month of December of 43, and he had gotten married to Catherine earlier that year. And while he was in the Navy, Roy used a young fella named Mickey Barnes, who was promoting Nashville while Nick was in the service. And Mickey Barnes had been in the wrestling business right that time. He hadn't been into it very long in the 40s, and he had been promoting in North Carolina for Crockett Sr., and he also ran shows through 52 using Roy and Nick's office. But Mickey Barnes is going to be a guy who promotes in the Kingsport, Johnson City over in Bo James territory. And he's going to be a prominent figure when we get to the point where Roy buys Memphis, because he calls on his trusted associate Mickey Barnes to help with that.
Yeah.
Got somebody who wrote in and asked me if Ginger the wrestling bear ever lost a match. And so, yes, she did, or he did. Ginger was actually a man. October 15th, 1940, Ginger took her first loss in Nashville. Buck Lawson, Count Von Zuppi, Angelo Martino, and the Green Shadow all piled on Ginger and pinned her. So Ginger was finally beaten him, but it took 4 guys to pin him. And we should finish up the story on the original Ginger, the wrestling bear. It's kind of sad, but October the 3rd, 1953, somebody gave Ginger a dose of strychnine.
This is terrible. That guy, I hope that guy's rotting in hell right now.
Yeah, somebody gave Ginger a dose of strychnine. Ginger went into convulsions and a coma, snapped out of the coma on August the 5th, and walked over to a block of ice that Pat Malone had in his backyard, drank a quart of water and his hourly milk and honey that Pat was feeding it, hoping to wash the strychnine out. But at 8 o'clock that night on August the 5th, Ginger's breathing became heavy and labored, and he passed away about 9:45 that night.
That's horrible. And did they catch the guy?
Nope. They offered a reward, and in the papers, they kept increasing the reward, hoping somebody would turn the guy in, but they never found him.
Was there ever any rumors? Was it wrestling related, or was it fan related?
Yeah, nobody knows.
And Jerry, you said that the bear in Oklahoma would run from Danny Hodge.
Oh, he was scared to death of Danny Hodge. Danny Hodge would pull the hairs off the scrotum sack, and then and the bear would just start squealing. But Danny would walk in. Back then, they kept the bear locked up in the shower room, because the shower room was separate from the guys, and then guys would go in.
He had a bear in the shower.
Had a bear in the shower, just like Jake used to show with snakes in the shower.
Oh yeah, and crawl all over the shower. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, guys were scared to death.
The same way with the bears. So he would hear Danny when Danny would walk in the building. The bear would be back there minding his own business in the shower, not having to care to the world. All of a sudden, Hodge would walk in. It's like he could smell Hodge's scent. The bear would just start hollering like that. Hodge would stick his head in the shower saw, and that bear would just go banana, as Pat Patterson would say.
And Danny could beat the bear.
Danny could beat the bear. Danny could duck under the bear, get the bear in the arm lock and arm scissor and all that stuff. But you can't pin a bear at all unless you got 50 guys on it. But he tried to he watched this kid. He tried to gator roll the bear one time. Where he grabbed the head of you, and you're not going to gator roll a bear either, because that bear's head could swell like that too.
So you guys are just sitting there in the locker room, and you got a bear in the shower?
We got a bear in the shower just like we had a snake in the shower during your time.
That's right. Yeah, we did.
I mean, what's more weird, a snake in the shower?
I tell you what, there was nothing worse going in that shower and realizing you might see a snake in there. That was horrifying.
A big snake, too, man.
A huge snake, yeah. Jake thought that was so funny.
Hey, John, can you enable me to share my screen?
I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay. I got an ad here from the Kentucky Theater, which was Jack Keller's movie theater in downtown Paducah, where they had matches. And there's an ad for the matches on April 15th, 1951. And the headliner on the ad for the matches is Ginger the Wrestling Bear. I mean, Ginger is the star, one of the stars of this territory. Yeah. And I sent you guys Roy's Christmas card. And Ginger's pictures on the Christmas card with the other wrestler stars, right? So Ginger was a huge star. So it's Ginger the Wrestling Bear versus Wild Bill Canny, one fall, no time limit. And then the semi-main is Tex Riley and Lester Welch. So Ginger's in the main event over those guys.
Yeah, wow.
But, Ginger was...
Let me get there. There is a picture of a young JBL wrestling a bear, and as you can see, the bear is biting me because it had no front teeth. So
that bear's getting near fall points on you.
Boy, that bear whooped me half to death, boy.
It cost you your scholarship.
It cost me my college scholarship, yeah, because the athletic director, me at a bar wrestling a bear at a Christian school. That man threw the book at me.
And John lied to the athletic director at a Christian school, no less.
I did. Tony, I'd gotten in trouble so many times, and I walked in the athletic director's office. My head coach gave me the heads up. He goes, "Did you wrestle a bear last night?" And I said, "Coach, you know how stupid that sounds?" He goes, You did, didn't
Did
you?
you?
And I said, yes, sir, I did. And he goes, oh my God. He goes, the athletic director wants to throw you out of school. He's so mad at you. He goes, you got to go see him. And I hated this guy. He hated me. He was a horrible human being. Hated him. And so anyway, I walk in there and he goes, all the things I've heard about you. Did you wrestle a bear in a bar last night? And I said, what is this, National Geographic? I go, of course not. What are you talking about? And he goes, so your answer is no. And I realize now this man has me. I realize he's got something on me, and I don't know what it is, but I realize he's got me. And I sat there and looked at him. I thought every time I've gotten in trouble, because drinking was not allowed at the college, even if you're of age, and you got in trouble. So I've been in trouble a lot. And I told the truth every time, got the book thrown at me every time. I always say, if you tell the truth, we'll be easy on you. They weren't easy on me. That's the biggest lie ever. So I'm sitting there and he goes, did you wrestle this bear? Yes or no? And I'm like, oh, God, I got one chance. I said, nope. And he goes, what are these? They had come out of that 1 hour photo lab back in the 80s. Somebody had been to one, developed the photos, and had left them in the training room. He had pictures of me wrestling the bear. So he literally had pictures in the 80s. And I'm looking at it and go, oh, you said bear. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You said bear.
No, they threw the book at me. I made All-American as a junior and got my scholarship taken and had to walk on as a senior as a returning All-American. They were so mad at me.
And what position did you play, John?
Offensive tackle. Played right tackle.
Yeah. I mean, if the guy would have been a wrestling promoter instead of an athletic director, he would have said, and we got offensive tackle that wrestles bears, man.
Oh, my goodness. So I just went back to Abilene Christian. They just won a game. They're about to go to the playoffs. Congratulations to those guys down there. And the one thing they wanted me to tell for the alumni deal was wrestling the bear. You know, now they think it's the greatest story ever. You know, back then they didn't have a sense of humor. At least that guy didn't.
So Tony, let's go back to Dick Goulas and his rise to stardom there. You started a story there.
He went in the service for 8 months or something like that, and that's when Roy used Mickey Barnes, and then when Nick got out, well, he took right back over where he left off. I want to talk a little bit about, we talked about in the first show how heels got over, and we talked about, they used a lot of physicality. They had to make sure the crowd saw everything they did, and they used lye soap, and they used, gouging, and they used foreign objects and all the different kind of stuff. Baby faces got over by selling. And that was pretty much a hallmark of Southern wrestling, became a hallmark of Southern wrestling too, that baby faces had to sell but not die. And a lot of that was based on the Welches, because the Welches would get over by getting their butts absolutely kicked. And Roy was a big proponent of hard ways. I sent you guys a photo of Roy and after a match. There were so many matches. Going through all the newspaper coverage of their towns at the time, there were so many matches where a Welch, particularly Roy, would take a beat down where fans would riot, and it would create a return for their revenge, right? They'd get stomped in the throat. There was one match in Nashville where Roy was down on the mat and the heel just kept stomping him and finally stomped him in the throat and kicked him out to ringside, and the place just about blew. I mean, fans charged the ring, tried to pick up Roy, tried to get a hold of the heel. They'd jab him in the back of the ribs, and they'd take these beat downs where they couldn't. They'd have a lot of no contests. They'd have a lot of being counted out of the ring, and the fans would get hot and rally behind the Welches, which would create all this fervor for them to come back and finally kick the heel's butt, right? But again, in the late 30s and in the 40s, blading was not prevalent. And so the way to really, and you can even see it later on with Buddy Fuller and Mario Galinto and on into the 70s, where they would just do these hard ways and these really brutal matches in order to get the match over and draw fans and sell tickets.
We saw the results of Mario Galinto. Was that match a work, or was that a shoot for some reason, or what?
I don't think so.
We had Fuller on, and what he told us was that the match with Galinto, the big one down in, I guess, it was in Alabama, right? That was the big blow off, right?
Well, they
Dolphin, Alabama.
They had a couple.
But
They
what
had
he
a
said
couple.
was, he said, "I'm gonna take the one shoot punch, and then to make it look legit, and then it was a work, but obviously a very, very, from what he said, a very, very stiff work."
Yeah, right.
I was in Japan. I was in Europe working for Otto. I wasn't there when he did it with Vader, but Otto told Vader one time, "Break my nose."
Mm.
And Vader did. Vader hit him with open hand palm right around the nose. I mean, he called the spot, "Break my nose." I mean, some of these old tough guys, they just did what what was right for the business, they felt. And
Yeah, and they learned it from the generation before, which was this one we're
The
talking about right now.
Welch influence, yeah.
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 March the 1st, 1946, Nick Gulas and Herb Welch are in a bad car accident in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Nick had 9 cracked ribs, a lacerated nose, and several cuts to his forehead. He was in the hospital for more than 2 weeks. Herb broke his arm. And one of the people in the other car was an 18-year-old boy from Franklin, Kentucky. He was killed. And there was an 18-year-old girl that was seriously injured. On March the 5th in Nashville. Now, this is the way that the Welches would, whatever happened, they'd draw money with it. So March 5th, 1946, Roy subs for Herb in Herb's Southern Junior title match. And Herb comes to ringside in a wheelchair. And the fans just go nuts. Like, you can't keep these Welches down, man. They're the tough heroes of this whole territory. And Roy wins the match, of course, and wheels Herb back to the dressing room after, and everybody's, throwing babies in the air. And one of their most arch nemesis is Wild Bill Canny lost the match to Roy, subbing for Herb. April 1946, the Nashville Tennessean paper says that Herb Welch has multiple fractures in his arm and may never wrestle again. He's got 2 weeks to return to the ring, or they're going to forfeit, or he's going to forfeit the Southern Junior Heavyweight title. And then they announced that matches in the cards the next several weeks will have tournament matches to determine the number 1 contender for Herb's title. But Herb can't come back by the time limit. So on June the 11th, 1946, they have a standing room only crowd. Winner of the match will be the new Southern Junior Heavyweight champion, and Tex Riley is the winner and is the new title holder. But, I mean, they never miss on capitalizing on every situation to draw fans.
And when did Herb wrestle again?
He came back at the end of 46.
So how long after this match that took the interim title? How long?
Yeah. So it was probably another 4 months, maybe after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think came back in maybe October of that year.
And was Tex a heel?
No, he was a babyface at this point.
So
babyface, new babyface champion.
Right. And did Roy end up getting the title back?
Oh yeah, Herb ended up getting the title back. I think
Herb
won the title like 11 or 12 times. I
Yeah.
mean, he was the perennial Southern Junior.
That's the ultimate storyline. The guy
Yeah,
can't come back, and you try to come back, and then you put the title up, and he has to sit there and watch it and be sad about it, and then finally come back months later, and
Yeah, which made
Wrestling.
Tex Riley a huge babyface and a Welch ally in the 50s.
right.
Because he was the guy who ended up winning Herb's title.
Did Riley end up promoting for him?
Yeah, Tex Riley? No, he ends up passing away in the 60s.
Okay.
Yeah. His career got cut short. 1946, here's some more family. Roy's sister Bonnie and her husband Virgil Speedy Hatfield and their 3 sons moved to Dyersburg, Tennessee. And Speedy Hatfield was from Peggs, Oklahoma. Where's that, Jerry?
That's down by Tulsa.
Okay.
Towards the Arkansas border there.
Yeah.
So southeast of Tulsa.
Speedy was a promoter during this time period. That was what happened when he came back when Roy put him to work promoting towns. But what he's really best known as is as a referee. And I sent you guys a photo of his tombstone, which has the referee and NWA's logo on his tombstone, and says official NWA referee on his gravestone.
Was Speedy an actual Hatfield?
Yes, that was his name, Hatfield, which his 3 sons, Lee, made his debut in 1950, and he started wrestling as Little Albert Lee before he finally settled on the name Lee Fields. Don Fields made his debut in 52, and he started wrestling as Don Wayne. And they were doing that. Were using their first and middle name kind of as their name before they started using the Fields name. And then Bobby Fields, the third son, he debuted in 1954, and he started out wrestling as Bobby Starr. He also wrestled as Luke Hatfield and Luke Fields when he worked for Roy in the Tennessee territory. But then when they all migrate south toward Alabama, they all settle on the Fields name. Speedy got into a little bit of trouble. He ended up in a situation where his sponsor, the American Legion, filed a lawsuit against him. And so this piece from the paper, February 20th, 1956, and the headline is Wrestling Halt Enters Court. Wrestling promoter Virgil Hatfield was temporarily enjoined from operating in the state of Arkansas this morning by Chancellor Lee Ward after picket post of the American Legion filed a lawsuit. The hearing was held in Jonesboro, Arkansas, which is the town that Speedy was the promoter of. In the complaint, picket post sought to collect damages from Hatfield because wrestling matches were canceled and to enjoin Hatfield from promoting a wrestling match which had been scheduled for Tuesday but canceled before this morning's hearing in Paragould. The chancellor enjoined the wrestling promoter until a final hearing could be held on the matter and until Hatfield is licensed to promote wrestling by the Arkansas Athletic Commission, and his promotions are sponsored by an organization that can qualify under the law as a sponsor. No date for a final hearing was set this morning. In filing suit, the Legion asked for damages of $60 a week for each week no wrestling match is held in Jonesboro. So every week they don't have wrestling, they want their money. And the Legion claims that it is authorized to hold matches by the Arkansas Athletic Commission and that Hatfield had a contract to put on the matches each week in Jonesboro for the Legion. Several weeks ago, Hatfield announced he was discontinuing wrestling matches in Jonesboro for an indefinite period. At that time, he gave bad weather as the reason for discontinuing the matches, and picket post commander Douglas Bradley said he has conferred with Hatfield's attorney, and he is confident that the difficulty can be solved and wrestling can be held in Jonesboro again in the near future. The attorney told Commander Bradley the Moose Club of Paragould and Hatfield had agreed to cancel the match set for Tuesday before the court action was brought. The attorney will be in Jonesboro late this week to confer with Commander Bradley, and the Legion commander said he felt sure a solution to the problem will be reached at that time. Commander Bradley emphasized the Paragould Moose Lodge is not a party in the suit, and the only purpose of the suit is to get wrestling matches underway in Jonesboro again. Hatfield operates Mid-South Booking Company in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and has promoted wrestling in Jonesboro for many years. So these guys are suing him because there's no wrestling.
Wow.
And they want to be paid $60 a week. Even
and they're in bed with the commission.
Correct.
They're all crooks.
Correct.
I mean, they're crooks. I mean, they're holding these guys hostage. You can't have a monopoly like that.
So what's interesting is there's nobody else to talk to about wrestling. I mean, they've got to work with Roy's group or there's nothing.
Right. There's not an independent. There's not somebody else running there. They know if they're going to run, they're going to run, and they've managed to rig the system where they're the only ones that can run. And it sounds like Roy doesn't want to run with them, or Hatfield doesn't.
Some kind of relationship failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, John, some type of relationship with that's amazing. That there were no promoters at all coming up behind the Welches.
Especially as hot as the territory was.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Right. Anyway, Speedy comes back and promotes there, I think, in a month or two. But that's just how powerful things were. I mean, we got arm wrestling going. We got to have wrestling back because it's putting money on in our wallets.
Right. And the Armory, what gets me about this is the Armory had the monopoly from the commission that they couldn't run somewhere else.
That's right.
That's BS, man.
Yeah,
that's as crooked as you can get.
Qualified sponsors. It's almost like handing them a list. Goes, these are the people you can work with, or nothing.
Right. It's the mafia.
Right. And we're going to have a whole lot coming up in our next episode. I'll do a little promote ahead. In our next episode, we're going to have a lot about the athletic commissions. So
Wow.
Good.
Great. We love athletic conventions.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of stuff in 1955 in Knoxville, and a lot of stuff in the 60s in Memphis, and some other stuff. And also, we're going to give you a little insight on how much money Roy's company was making at the time.
Good.
Wow. Yeah.
There's a cool story. I just thought I'd mention this. There's a story in the Nashville paper, January 17th, 1947, about a pretty and shapely girl who buys a pair of shoes at Church Street at a store. And she says, just have them delivered to the Hippodrome, which the Hippodrome is known for wrestling, but it's known for other entertainment options too, singing, dancing, plays, and such forth. So the salesman asks if she's a singer or an actress. This is a good-looking woman. He says, no, I'm neither one. I'm Helen Heald, and I'm a wrestler. And the shoe seller thought he was being ribbed, but he went to the matches that Tuesday night at the Hippodrome, and sure enough, there she was. Now, do you guys know who Helen Heald is?
I don't.
Doing bars.
It's the mother of Ted DiBiase.
Really?
Wow.
Wow. What a great Colonel. What a Colonel, like a story, finding. What a great story.
Yep. Helen Heald, and she was a good-looking lady.
Pretty lady, mother of the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I got another.
I did not realize that Ted's dad and mother both were wrestlers.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Wow.
January 6, 1948, we have the first 8-man tag team match with all 4 Welch brothers in the match. Draws a standing room only crowd at the Hippodrome in Nashville. September 27, 1949, Nick Goulas and his wife, Catherine, have a reception at the Maxwell House Hotel, which, by the way, is where the Nashville wrestling office was located. They rented the ballroom there, and they had their baptism of their little baby son, George Goulas. And then that baptism was held at the Greek Orthodox Church because Nick was Greek and very much a member of the Greek Orthodox Church. And so they held a big party that night in honor of baby Nick getting baptized.
Baby George.
Baby George. Yeah, Baby George.
Baby George. Yeah, we may have Baby George on our podcast soon.
Oh, good. Yeah, I had somebody reach out to me too about George. So here's another close member of the Welch group, and that is Christine Jarrett. So in the spring of 1941, Christine Wright graduates from East High School in Nashville. Late summer 1941, she meets a U.S. Army soldier named Winston Jarrett. She ends up getting pregnant, and they marry against the wishes and advice of her mother, Bertie, and her whole family who hate Winston. And so early 1942.
I love these old names that pop up here.
Yep. Early 1942, Winston is deployed in the war overseas. Christine gets a job selling donuts on the corner to people on the way to their jobs in the morning in Nashville. Standing on the street as a lowly donut girl, she thinks about how she can provide a better life for her husband and her son. September 4th, 1942, she gives birth to her son, Jerry Winston Jarrett. And Christine gets a better job as a cashier at Woolworth's department store. And while riding the city bus one day with little Jerry in her lap, her mother spots Winston with another woman who Winston claims was his cousin. At first, when Christine's mom comes home and she's told the story by her mother, she takes Winston's side of the story and says, "Oh, Mom, that can't be true. That's his cousin." She goes, "I don't think he would be doing things like that with his cousin." So late summer 44, Christine gets a telegram that Winston's been wounded in a battle and is being sent home. He is transferred to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is just north of Nashville, for the rest of his military career. Meanwhile, Christine's pregnant again. I guess Winston came home on leave. And Winston's second child, Carolyn Christine Jarrett, is born June 1945. Wow. Christine gets a better job at the First American National Bank. And in December of 45, Christine finds a note on the bed that had fallen out of Winston's clothes when she did the laundry, when the note read, "Darla, Honeycomb Inn, room 211, 5 p.m. When confronted, Winston went back to his cousin's story again with a different woman, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and she tossed Winston out of what would become known by the family and the wrestlers as her grip. 6 months after that, in 1946.
And what was the grip?
That was, her. I'll explain a little bit better when she gets in the wrestling business, but it was grabbing by the neck and behind and the ear and by the mouth, and she did that to many a wrestler that was not.
That's great. That's
As
great.
a matter of fact,
And about their payoff.
How do you know? How do you know the note? Because that's obviously that's very detailed. Where did that come from in history? Was that written in a book or something?
That came from Christine's grandson. He had her grandson. Shoot, man, I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but I'll be sure and credit him on our last show.
That note was obviously either saved or something in history.
Yeah.
That's very specific, room number and all that.
I'm sure she told that story for years.
Sure.
His name's not Jarrett, so I can't think of his name right now. But I will make sure and mention it. She throws him out with the grip, and in 1946,
I love she already had the grip.
What's that?
I love that she already had the grip.
Yeah. And we're going to talk later on when we talk more about Christine in the wrestling business. We're going to talk about the grip. We're going to talk about her basic rules and a whole lot of other things that she had as a promoter. But in 1946, she and her sister meet Nick Goulas while they're at lunch one day at the restaurant in the Two-Lane Hotel. And after meeting the two girls, Nick starts pitching a job selling tickets. Nick's a guy who's a promoter and a hustler, and part of his job is to get the tickets sold. So he's got to find the outlets and the people that sell the tickets. So Christine goes to work in the fall of 1946 for the Goulas Welch Company as a ticket seller. She still works at the shoe store, and she sells tickets in the back room of the shoe store to people who are there to either buy tickets or buy shoes. Now, the reason I bring all this up is Jerry was born in 1942. She hadn't even met Roy Welch yet. She just meets Mick Goulas in the fall of 1946. So I don't think there's any way Roy Welch could be Jerry's father.
Right.
That's a rumor that was been a
that's always the kind of the Tennessee, goofy rumor, that guys love, perpetrating and stuff. And so that's it.
But I like knocking those kinds of things in the head. So we just,
and I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Here on Brisco and Bradshaw.
Yes, sir. Brisco and Bradshaw. We're here all for truth, justice, and the American way.
Truth. Yeah.
Do you guys see that?
Like
do you guys see that newspaper thing I sent you with 8-year-old Jerry Jarrett?
What an opie looking picture that was. Right?
That's from the September 3rd, 1950 Nashville Tennessean. There's a picture of the 8-year-old Jerry Jarrett in the paper congratulating him on his 8th birthday. So that's kind of a cool preview of coming attractions. 1949, Roy Welch's Dyersburg office, which I think this is kind of interesting too. When Roy becomes a member, he's the 8th member of the National Wrestling Alliance. And it's not the Nashville office, it's the Dyersburg office. And it's not Nick, it's Roy that becomes the member of the National Wrestling Alliance. And you'll remember that promoters are not members, only booking offices. And Roy's Dyersburg office is the one that gets the membership, which it extends to the Nashville office too. But I just think it's interesting because Roy's heart is always in Dyersburg, and that is always going to be close to his heart, and his favorite is the little territory that he formed to get everything going. So when he joins the National Wrestling Alliance, he joins under the Dyersburg office in Dyersburg, Tennessee. We talked about Roy leaving Florida. He vacated Lake Worth on June 1st, 1949, and he vacates that to George Romanoff, and basically leaves the state. George Romanoff was an old wrestler, also an old Broadway show kind of guy. He worked Broadway in New York in the 20s. By the 30s, he had moved into promotion. He also promoted Jacksonville back in those days. He ran regular shows there, and he actually died in 1950. in a car accident between Daytona Beach and Jacksonville. And he was 56 years old, and that opened up even more of Florida for Cowboy Luttrell. It'd be interesting when we ever get around to doing our Florida show, but that's kind of an interesting little tidbit there about George Romanoff. Sunset Carson, you ever hear of him?
Sunset, I met Sunset, I think, back in the day too.
He was a 1940
cowboy, Roy Rogers clone, right?
Yeah. He was a 1940s Western movie star, mostly in B movies. He was, back in that day. I posted a pic on Twitter this week about Roy Rogers and Twitter. They were the biggest cowboy horse act out on the entertainment circuit.
But not as big as our wrestling bear.
Yeah, Ginger was bigger in the Tennessee territory. But Sunset Carson was kind of a knockoff of Roy Rogers. And so he worked a lot of shows for Roy as special referee. And that he's also in Frankie Kane's book. And Frankie tells all kinds of stories about Sunset Carson was drunk most of the time at the matches and going out to referee. Buddy Fuller, he makes his debut in 1950. And he starts.
Okay, let's stop right there. Buddy Fuller. Now is it Fuller? That's his legal name, right? Fuller was his legal name?
His legal name is Ed Welch.
Ed Welch.
So he was named.
How did the Fuller name come up? How did we get to that?
Yep. So Buddy is named after his grandfather, Big Ed. So his name is Ed Welch, just like his granddad. And he replaced a wrestler on a card somewhere in Arkansas. I can't exactly find the particular date and time, but it was in Arkansas somewhere. He replaced a guy named John Bud Fuller. And Buddy thought, I kind of like that name. So he wrestled. He actually used a couple of different names there for a year or two. He used Ed Welch. He used Buddy Fuller in a couple of different places. In 1951, he wrestled as Ed Welch in Bristol, Tennessee. He wrestled a tag team match that same show with Angelo Martinelli to beat John Swinski and another young rookie wrestler named.
Let me stop you right, John. Angelo Martinelli. You remember I told you I saw Secretariat run in the Baltimore race. What is that? Preakness?
Yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm.
And where he ran off. Angelo's the one that took me to the race there.
Wow.
Really?
Big in the horse racing.
And also, for those that don't know what you're talking about, you saw Secretariat run as part of the triple leg that he won.
Yeah.
Was it the last?
That's it. That was the last one. Yeah.
Okay, if it was the last one, it was
that's what Angelo took me to.
Yeah, if it was
I'd
the
never
one.
been to a horse race before. We were in Richmond, which is what 2.5 hours away. He said, "Well, I'd love to see that." He said, "I know I got some connections up there. I'll take you, kid." So,
Was it
So if
sold
it
out?
was it was the last.
oh yeah,
sold
for
out?
sure. Yeah, it was packed. Yeah,
Because Secretariat was. I mean that horse
it was
maybe
the hottest ticket in town.
greatest
Yeah, if
horse
it
of all
was-
time.
If it was the
Yeah.
last race where Secretariat won by 40 links or something like
And
that.
we were down in what do they call it, the paddock area and all that stuff. Angelo through his wheeling and dealing, knew everybody and all. And we nearly got killed leaving the horse race. We were on the interstate going back to Richmond. We're behind this truck, had these pallets on it. One of the pallets blew off, hit the road right in front of us. We're lucky it hit one, and it bounced right over the top of the car. If that pallet would have come through, it would have wiped out me and Angelo both.
Was it the last race, Jarrett? Was it the one where Secretariat won by 40
Yeah,
links or
About
something?
40 links, yeah.
Yeah, that was a Belmont then.
Yeah, Belmont, yeah.
Belmont Stakes. Yeah.
And
I
those were
love
pro
that.
horses. I mean, he beat pro horses by 40 links.
Yeah. I love that photo. As a matter of fact, I'm going to hang it up in my office. It's in a box here. I've got it framed somewhere where Secretariat is running in the rail and the rider on Secretariat's looking back over his shoulder and all the horses are way back there.
Way back. Yeah,
I love that photo. I love that one. In that tag team match with Angelo Martinelli and Buddy Fuller, they beat John Swinski and another rookie wrestler named Eddie Gossett from Chattanooga.
Eddie Gossett, Eddie Graham.
1953, Pat Malone beat Buddy Fuller at the Kentucky Theater we've been talking about in Paducah.
Okay, guys, sorry to interrupt you, but that's the photo right there.
That's so funny. Awesome.
I love that photo, man. I love
He's
that.
looking back like those guys are on
Those
those guys are on Glue Factory guys. I'm on the
Yeah.
real horse.
Oof. And Secretariat was so sick the night before that they thought he wasn't going to make the race.
Wow.
But it's miraculously made the race and won by, gosh, all that distance. So Lee Fields comes into the business. We talk about Virgil Hatfield's son. So Lee comes in.
Let me tell y'all right quick, Tony. What a great story, though, you have on for Buddy Fuller. What a great way to get a name. I never heard that. I always wondered, like Jerry said, why is that name from? He just literally just pinched the name from somebody and became Buddy Fuller, which is
and the guy he replaced too, which is cool.
Yeah. And we can ask Ron and all that, but I would imagine that it was just to distance himself and be his own guy, and not be connected to, since he's a wrestler.
And he started late in life too, right?
He was mid-20s.
And was Buddy Fuller a big, tall guy like his sons?
Buddy's 6'3". Buddy's tall guy, 6'3".
Pretty good sized fella. Yeah.
He's one of those big. He's like Ronald Robert, tall and lanky, slim, real slim.
Yeah.
So in the 1950s, Nashville just keeps rolling on. They got all these sellouts at the Hippodrome, 3,000 seats. The hot heel is the Black Phantom, who is Art Nelson under a mask. And he's, working with that junior heavyweight championship is the, title that everybody's fighting over. He's got all these great feuds with Roy and Herb and Nelson. Then he's working he's working in Knoxville without the mask as a babyface. He's working in Nashville as a heel under a mask. Also, another heel in the territory is George Zaharias, who is a pretty big-time heel for the Welches through the 50s. He was the
married to pro golfer Babe.
Crying Greek from Cripple Creek. Yeah. And Tojo Yamamoto debuted in 1953. And, of course, Harold Watanabe from Hawaii, but he's positioned as the Japanese heel, which did close right after World War II. He's got heat right away just with his
Funny how the foreign guys are always heels.
Yeah, that's a storyline, too, that Tony would like to cover sometime with you. All the ethnic groups are, following, certain world events, like the war with the Germans and the Japanese and, the Arabs and so forth like that.
Yeah, in the 1960s, Saul Weingroff. Saul Weingroff's going to come back, who had been a promoter for Roy in Daytona Beach, and he's going to be a Jewish guy managing two Germans as a tag team. Yeah. And that's going to get heat big time. I remember as a kid, I thought the Von Brauners were the road warriors of that era. Yeah. I mean, I just didn't see any way anybody was ever going to beat those guys, But they were a big German Nazi gimmick in the 60s. The Green Hornet is another masked heel in the 50s. Tex Riley was his major programmed with him through most of half of the decade. Wild Bill Canny, we mentioned him from Kansas City. He was a terrible rule breaker and pretty hectic and crazy, did a lot of physical things in the ring.
That's what they called the hills back in those days. They didn't call them hills, they called them rule breakers.
Rule breakers. Yeah, and the baby faces were scientific.
Scientific and rule breakers, yeah.
Yeah. One night, this is kind of a funny story about Wild Bill Canny. He was in Kingsport, Tennessee one night. He walked into the arena, and the whole arena is on fire against him and jeering him and booing him. And there was one lady at ringside that's clapping for him and cheering for him. And he stops by and he goes, "Excuse me, lady, what are you trying to do? Ruin my career?" Like most hated heels, he would eventually turn babyface later on in the decade. And he also would become a referee in Knoxville for a long, long time. And Ron Wright says that Wild Bill Canny was his biggest influence. Wow. Rowdy Red Roberts, a longtime heel in the Tennessee territory. He was arrested in 1944 by the deputy sheriff Estill Wrinkle in Knoxville on a charge of malicious mischief for using ether or chloroform in his match against Prince Emil Badu. And George Kazana paid $1,000 bail to get him out of jail. Wow. And he had a court date in April. But this is how much these guys, these guys are working the matches, security guys, And the heel pulls out his physical gimmick to do the chloroform or the ether, and the cop arrests the guy and charges him with malicious, whatever.
And when they pull that out, as we discussed last time, it was one of those pantomime deals where they pull it out and they show it to everybody. And so the ether, they back in those days, they really wanted people to smell it. So they would kind of get it wet and kind of squeeze it and toss it back.
I mean, in this era, these cops that are working the event are like, I saw what you did, and you're going to jail.
What happened with the court case? Did he roll on wrestling, or did he just go ahead and swallow it?
It got thrown out. The prosecution never showed up. So my guess is George said, "Hey, yeah, right." The prosecution never came up. I put this one in just for you, John. So October 28, 1947, Mike Chacoma is hospitalized with a broken leg at the hands of a new masked wrestler known as the Bat. Now, the Bat took the place of Chacoma on the card and beats the hero, Tex Riley. And now that's the first round of the Southern Tag Team Tournament, by the way. So the second round of the Southern Tag Tournament, the Bat and Jim Spencer advanced. They beat Roy and Herb 2-1. So, I mean, they're going over the Welches. So this heel is really going to get a push here. November 18th, 1947, the Bat beat Frank Marconi 2-1 in 19 minutes. And then on December 2nd, 1947, it's time for Tex Riley to get his revenge on the heel. And in a no time limit, no disqualification match, Tex Riley beats the Bat. And, of course, when the Bat gets beat, he's a masked wrestler. He's got to take his mask off. He takes his mask off, and it's announced to the crowd, this is Frank Hill. Do you know who Frank Hill is?
I don't. No.
This is Frank Hill Murdoch.
Frankie
Dickie Murdoch's daddy. Yeah.
There you go, John.
Murdoch's dad.
Yep.
Wow.
And he worked that mask gimmick of the Bat in Amarillo as well. And that's how I zeroed in on that. I wonder if this is the same. And it was. It's the same guy.
Wow.
Dickie
So Murdoch's dad was this like his biggest territory that he worked?
That in West Texas.
Yeah.
West. I mean, he and Dory Funk Sr. had amazing programs and drew a lot of money.
Yeah.
It seemed like that belt there, Tony, the Tennessee, Oklahoma, West Texas, it seemed like those guys it's kind of like, because like I keep saying, when you mention a name, they came from Tennessee into Oklahoma. Then when they finished Oklahoma, they went in again, Texas. Then they just went all the way back the other way when they were finished up. So.
Yeah, after Roy joined the National Wrestling Alliance in 1949, that gave him a couple things. One, it networked him with the NWA guys, and he and Sam Avey got real close. And he also got real close with Mushnick. And
at that time too, you were saying that they were promoting both styles there.
Well, after he joined the NWA, he got access to Thez and some of the other people. He got access to the World Junior Champion, and he got access to a couple of heavyweights that he would bring in.
How did they draw a comparison to the established guys?
Well, in Roy's towns, they drew pretty well, but in other towns, they struggled. And we'll talk about that when we talk about Memphis, because Memphis wrestling with the heavyweights really struggled until Memphis became a Roy town. And it's kind of a curious thing I want to mention to you when we get to that point. But Memphis didn't draw all that well with wrestling. And they were booked by both Avey. Avey was the booking office for Charlie Rentrop and then Les Wolfe. And then they switched booking offices over to Mushnick's booking office in St. Louis, thinking that would help, and they still didn't draw a lot. And by the time
under Bob Burns or Bob Launchen booking,
Bobby Bruns, yeah. And really, by the time Roy buys it, it's really kind of dead for wrestling, which obviously is going to be a big opportunity. We'd mentioned Eddie Gossett. He was from a little town called Dayton, Tennessee, which is right outside Chattanooga. And he broke into business as a teenager in the Chattanooga area. From 1942 to 1947, just 12 years old, he trained and wrestled at the local YMCA.
Wow.
Where he met and was mentored by Cowboy Latrell starting in 1944. And Gossett made his debut in 1947 at just 17. And some sources indicate he initially wrestled in Texas under the name Rip Rogers, which he did in Amarillo. And he was
okay. That was kind of a question mark to me because of the way you worded it. Rumors but he did. He was the original Rip Rogers.
Yeah. He moved out there in late '54. He wrestles here in the Tennessee territory from 52 to around 54. And then he moves out to West Texas, and that's where he really starts becoming a star. Sarpolis changes his name to Rip Rogers.
Now, that's not where he met Jerry Graham, right?
Let's see. No, actually, they wrestled here once in Tennessee before he went to West Texas. So Sarpolis changed his name and booked him as the brother of Buddy Rogers. And actually, Sarpolis booked the first sort of heel faction. So it was Bulldog, Danny Pletchis, Iron Mike DiBiase, and Eddie as Rip Rogers. And
John, you got to know Danny Pletchis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, Danny Pletchis, he was the one that they gave Bronco credit for counting with his foot. It was Bulldog that actually did it, not Bronco.
Yeah, Bulldog, yeah.
Yeah, it's Bulldog, yeah.
Yeah, well, they were in the first group of 3 heels that was ever in West Texas, and I'm not sure about in professional wrestling, but they wrestled.
So let me ask you a question. When did the Dusick Riot Squad happen in Nebraska?
They were close to probably a little bit earlier.
Those are probably the first 2 big factions, and one of them probably pinched from the other one.
Yeah, and eventually Sarpolis turns when Rip is really getting over as a heel. When their heels are hottest, that's when you turn them, right? He turned Rip babyface, put him as a tag partner with Dory Sr. Their relationship really grows. They're the world tag team champions together for a run. And then after that, then Eddie leaves and gets with Dr. Jerry, and they become the Golden Grams in New York. But quite a put rocket fuel on Eddie there those years in the mid '50s for sure.
Yeah.
Seemed like Eddie took off quick. I mean,
yeah.
Boom, he must have been really talented. The guy could really work good.
Yeah, and I mentioned this in our Dory Funk Senior show, but I'll throw it in again. Sarpolis booked the first Lights Out match in Wichita Falls with Eddie as a babyface. They were really having trouble drawing a crowd in Wichita Falls. They were trying to get the town going, and he booked a Lights Out match where essentially all the rules are suspended. The National Wrestling Alliance has nothing to do with this. They flash the lights, and then they have the match. Eddie.
It's great. They went through the formality of flashing the lights.
John, that was even happening in the '70s with Dusty Rhodes. All these Lights Out matches, every the arena. Okay, they make the announcement. Okay, the main event is over. When the main event is over, we'll flash the lights 3 times, dedicate to a special Lights Out match, and that's how.
National Wrestling Alliance has no jurisdiction over this.
Yeah, don't sanction non-sanctioned NWA match.
But I love the formality of flashing the lights.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. You got to do the gimmick.
Showbiz, man. Showbiz.
Eddie loved that gimmick so much.
But I mean, but think about the hype of the crowd. You're waiting to see the Lights Out match, and you know what's going to happen. The main event's over, and all of a sudden you hit the lights 3 times. I mean, I'm
going to tell the Dusty Rhodes story here. That's the reason Dusty, he loved those Lights Out. Dusty hated following anybody because Dusty's work was limited. So he would always figure out a way to go on last, and this unsanctioned Lights Out match was the easiest way for him to go on last. So it'd be out of the section. So it had to be after everything was over with. So you'd finish your card. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this non-sanctioned lights 3 times. Here comes the American Dream out. Woo, go crazy.
I was so my favorite year in wrestling was 1974, and I was so fascinated because it seemed like to me they were having lots of those in Florida, Jerry.
That's the reason why, though. Everywhere Dusty was, it had to be a Lights Out match because he wanted to go on last, and he didn't want to follow anybody.
So I went and counted them. And there were 74. Bill Watson,
Wow.
Eddie Graham booked 74 lights out matches in 1974.
That's more than one a week.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. They were every night here in Florida, man.
Eddie loved that gimmick, man.
Yeah.
He
Well,
loved
Dusty loved it. Dusty, because he could go on lights like that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that was the year Dusty turned.
That was American Dream year. 74 was American
Yeah,
Dream year.
yeah, and I'm sure Eddie said, "Oh man, we did this thing back in West Texas. We got to do this with you."
There's nothing new in this business, man.
I should mention too that
we're giving all the new stuff talking to you, Tony, because this is developing of all this stuff.
I should mention too that this is another little interesting fact about Eddie Graham, but he was also tag team champions with Roy. So he was tag team champions with Roy. He was tag team champions with Dory Sr. But they were tag team champions twice. They held
the relationship with Dory and Eddie and the Welch family was, I mean, they were like brothers. A lot of people always thought they were brothers. I mean, Buddy and Eddie were inseparable at times.
They were from Tennessee, man.
Yeah.
But they held the Southern Tag titles twice, and Eddie was drafted in early 1951. He went into the Army and he went to Camp Carson, Colorado, but he was discharged in September after they discovered he was legally blind in one eye. And he came back to the Tennessee territory through the mid-50s before he went out to West Texas.
So wait a minute, Jerry, he was legally blind in one eye?
Yes.
So you were flying with a drunk,
one-eyed pilot.
Drunk one-eyed pilot with no depth perception.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
my God.
Every Wednesday night, man. Every Wednesday and Thursday, man. Sometimes Friday.
And then he further. Then
he's got no depth perception, and he's hammered.
Yeah.
And then listen to this. Not only was it, because that when I read your notes, that was news to me because I didn't know the story always was Eddie lost his eye and he sued the Armory. That's how we got
at the Tampa Armory.
At the Tampa Armory, he was dressing in the dressing room. One of the panes of the window fell out of the window at the Armory and hit Eddie in the eye. Eddie claimed he lost his eyesight over it. Right,
collected insurance on it too. I think
collected everything, and then got the building for life for free almost.
Right.
Wow.
That's wrestling business, baby. I'm wrestling with art.
Yes, it is.
So 1950, Roy's a member of the NWA now, so he starts booking Thez into the territory. He starts bringing him in to defend the NWA title. He's got another masked wrestler set up to try to take the title from Lou, named the Dark Secret. Thez wins the match, retains the title, unmasks the Dark Secret. That's Gene Bowman. He brings in Don McIntyre. At this point, too, Roy starts working with Paul Jones in Georgia. Don McIntyre owns part of the territory. Roy starts working with him, bringing him in because Don controls the Georgia version of the Southern title. So there's a lot of Southern title match defenses in the 50s in Roy's territory.
I can proudly say I was a Southern heavyweight champion at one time.
There you go. September 19th, 1950, the Black Phantom defeated McIntyre for the Southern title in 2 straight falls. Art Nelson was also working the Atlanta territory at this time with no mask. And he had actually won the title from McIntyre on July 7th, and he was the champion actually when they did this match in Tennessee, because after all, nobody knows anything about any other territory, and no one knows.
Back in those days, that was the mindset. Nobody knows it.
Yeah,
300 miles.
can't.
Yeah, tell me this. Art worked all over the South. He never worked Florida much. Was there some type of heat with Eddie, or do you know of it?
I don't know.
If you look, Art wasn't really down in Florida much at all.
No, he worked the Carolinas a lot. He worked
Carolina,
Tennessee a lot.
Georgia.
He worked Texas.
Oklahoma. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a Latrell thing or an Eddie thing, or I don't know what it was. Here's a neat little story that ties in with Nashville being Music City, USA. So in December 1953, one of the biggest country stars in the country at the time,
I love this story.
Webb Pierce,
I'm walking the floor over you.
Yeah, I'm in the jailhouse
Webb
now.
Pierce was There Stands a Glass, right? They just redid that song recently. I can't think of the guy's name that did it. Yeah.
And his biggest, and what's interesting about this story is his biggest hit was "I'm in the jailhouse now."
Yeah.
And he really was in the jailhouse because he was dating Cora Combs. And Pierce shows up drunk at the Hippodrome trying to get into her dressing room. And police stop him and say, "You can't go back there. That's the women's dressing room." He said, "Yes, I can. Cora told me, she invited me to come in." So they took him away and took him to jail. About 10 o'clock that night, Cora goes down to police headquarters.
After the matches, she waited until after the matches.
She had to work her match, which she worked the semi-main event that night. And about 10 o'clock, she showed up at the police headquarters.
She went, bailed her man out of jail.
Told them it was all a big misunderstanding, and I need you to release my man. And the police said, "No, his blood alcohol level's too high. We're not going to let him go." She goes, "Okay, well, I'll come back later." She comes back at midnight, and they released him, and the newspapers have a picture of them leaving the jailhouse.
And he's the biggest star in country and western music at that time.
He is. Which would only come by being the rest.
Right?
What's that?
You're saying Webb Pierce was?
He was that year.
He was that year, John, there's a story and a picture that Tony sent to us. And
there stands a glass. I just looked it up. That's why I was looking down. Sam Hunt redid the thing. There stands a glass. Webb Pierce.
Yeah, that's right.
Great song.
You bet. Webb Pierce
came out a couple years ago. Sam Hunt, and I love that song.
That's he is a mega star at the time, and I sent you guys the newspaper.
So he's just like a fun, good-loving country singer, drunk and having.
Hey man, I get dating a girl wrestler.
We're getting the girl wrestler. Wow.
And of course, Cora was in the business for years, and her daughter Debbie was in the business.
Okay, so I was looking down trying to find the Webb Pierce. Who was Webb Pierce dating?
Cora Combs.
Cora Combs. Okay.
Yeah, I sent you guys that in an email. That story. But Cora was in the business for years. She broke her daughter, Debbie, in. They were Polish. Debbie actually now, I think, works for the sheriff's department in Nashville. They would work matches together. Cora would work under a mask as Lady Satan. As a matter of fact, I saw a couple of their matches where Cora was Lady Satan and Debbie Combs was the babyface in the match. And it was a mother-daughter match, but nobody knew it because they didn't know Lady Satan was Cora. It was kind of interesting. But Rowdy Red Roberts, 1953, Southern Junior title against Fred Blassie. Freddie Blassie's in the territory from Atlanta. Again, this is another Georgia connection. Jackie Fargo is the referee for the matches. He's listed just as Jack Fargo. And I believe this December 29th, 1953 is Jackie Fargo's first appearance in Nashville as a referee. January 12th, 1954, this is the first time Jack Fargo actually wrestles a match in Nashville, and he loses in the opening match to Jim Osteri, and he's still wrestling as Jack Fargo. April and May of 1954, Roy gets his first bit of competition by another promoter in Nashville, Nick Carter and Dick Lever, who Dick Lever worked for the Nashville city government, started promoting Nashville's at the Dixie Arena. Don Cortez, Carlos Rodriguez, and Al Getz all went to work for the opposition. And it lasted until like the next month before they closed down. So it really wasn't much competition
now,
at all.
Tony, TV is starting to come around, and that's where you get the emergence of the Dumont Network and Gorgeous George. Mm-hmm. Was TV in this territory yet?
Just about. This is where the Dumont Network is hitting its peak in 1954. And so we're going to hit the TV all at once here in just a little bit. So we got Dumont Network on TV. Roy is basically still promoting through the newspaper and a little bit in radio. April 29th, 1954, we get the first appearance of a young wrestler named Jimmy Dykes, who would eventually become a referee. And down the road, he's going to become the manager, J.C. Dykes, who is the manager. Infernos. Yep. May 18th, 1954, Eddie Gossett and Dr. Jerry Graham beat Henry Harrell and Eddie Williams 2 falls to 0. I believe this is the first time that the future Graham brothers have actually formed a tag team, even though Eddie is still Eddie Gossett. Eddie was leave for West Texas soon, change his name to Rip Rogers. We talked about that. And Eddie and Dr. Jerry would go to New York City as the Golden Grahams in 1958. I put this one in for Jerry. December 28th, 1954, Roy, Herb, and Vern Bottoms defeated Elmer Lawson, Carl Kowalski, and Kathy Branch 2 falls to none in a best out of 3 falls mixed tag match, because I know Jerry loves Vern Bottoms.
I did. I love Vern Bottoms. She was the first female manager I ever saw in my life. She carried so much heat around with her. So Daddy Jack Donovan. She married Daddy Jack Donovan, right, Tony?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, she used to be billed as Mrs. Jack Donovan on the card.
John, she carried a red brick in her purse, literally. And she would nail fans with it right and left. Fans reach out for her. She just quicker than nail.
Really?
Bat them upside the head.
Was she the first lady heel manager?
As far as I know, I mean,
probably, yeah.
About the same time, Gorgeous George, had his wife as a manager, but that was way out on the West Coast.
Yeah. Vern Bottoms, man, she was something else. But
yeah, she was
flaming red hair.
What a great name!
Yeah, the fact that she was billed as Mrs. Jack Donovan got heat, man. That's kind of cool.
And Jerry, you saw her work?
Oh yeah, I was in dressing rooms with him all the time. Daddy, it was one of the hills when I was growing up that kind of attracted me to wrestling. Them and him and the Assassins, Leroy McGurk had a bunch of really good old Tennessee hills in that territory.
Yeah.
So Nashville's cooking here up to 1955. Knoxville. Let's talk about Knoxville a little bit. George Kazana. Roy is sending him talent. So Roy's getting booking fees for all these guys going to Knoxville.
Wow.
George Kazana, we talked about the big run the Green Shadow had. Following that, George Kazana was a big community fella. Every December from 1942 to 1963, he worked with the Empty Stocking Fund, the Goodfellows Fund, and the Milk Fund. In the later years, when George stepped away, his wife Faye and his son John Kazana were the faces of wrestling in Knoxville. But when they did the big fundraiser every year, the media always said it was George that was doing it. That's how much of an impression George had made on the community. And
that fund still goes on today, doesn't it?
Even today, total contributions over the years, according to the newspaper reports, the 22 years they worked together, the Milk Fund got about $26,000 from wrestling and George Kazana, which $26,000 from 1942 to 1963 was an amazing amount of money. Art Nelson and Roy Welch defeat Rowdy Red Roberts and Buddy Fuller, which was a father-son match. No one knew that because Buddy's working as Buddy Fuller, right, and his dad's in the match. Vern Gagne made 6.
Unless you went to the hardware store and got paid your $2 and you found out.
Yeah.
So this is another. Mike Maroney. Go ask Mike Maroney. You know that Buddy Fuller? That's Roy's son. That'll be $2, please.
Yeah, $2, please.
Vern Gagne. This is another indication of Roy's NWA connection, because in 1951, Vern Gagne is the hottest star in the country. And
the Dumont Network.
Yeah, out of Chicago. And he only made 6 appearances in Knoxville, all in the same year of 1951, because he was a star on the Dumont Network, and he was getting booked through Jim Barnett in the Fred Kohler office. Roy tried to team up with Art Nelson for a while. They did an angle. They couldn't get along, which led to a couple of babyface tag team matches with Roy and Herb on one side and Art and another babyface on the other side. Buddy Rogers only wrestled in Knoxville 6 times. The first 3 of those were sellouts in 1953. The 4th through the 6th time drew large crowds, but not as big as the first 3. And I think it's kind of interesting because Buddy was a heavyweight, but worked like a light heavyweight. And he's the reason Sam Mushnick got a foothold in St. Louis, was by banging Buddy Rogers in which again reinforces that the light heavyweights were always more exciting south in the southern part of the United States than the heavyweights. And so Buddy made some appearances in Knoxville, not a whole lot. I'm sure he had bigger fish to fry.
That's what you're saying there. It wasn't a big heavyweight, but he had to be the smallest of the heavyweights during that period of time. He world heavyweight champion, so he had to be one really on the small side because Buddy's no bigger than I
was. Yeah. Well, when Sam and Tom Pax were going at it in St. Louis, Sam was getting killed, and he was not drawing at all, and he couldn't get on top of Pax.
Right.
But when he brought Buddy in, and people saw Buddy and his whole blonde persona, and he was the atomic blonde and all of that, that felt like new and fresh. Plus, he did all those high spots with the same guys he worked with all over the country. It really got over, and that's really how Sam Mushnick got a foothold in St. Louis. January 6th, 55, a big match kicked off the year with Lou Thez and the NWA World Title and Freddie Blassie in Knoxville. Thez was seconded, of course, at this time by Strangler Lewis. And Strangler was employed by the National Wrestling Alliance to travel with Lou Thez because Lou felt he owed Strangler Lewis for breaking him in the business. And Lou still got his 10% of the gate, but he got the NWA to tack on another 3% for Strangler Lewis to pay for Strangler.
That's where the 13% came in. I always wondered
that's
that
right.
Was such a strange figure. So that was
3% went to Strangler and his travel expenses and hotel room and food and all that. And that was a big contention argument at the NWA convention every year. But Lou, he held sway.
So after that, they kept the 13% up, but that 3% went straight to Sam.
Yeah, that's right.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the 10% went to the champion, but the 3% went to Sam.
Went right to Sam.
Yeah. I mean, the 13% went to Sam. Now, how he divided it up after that, I don't know. But and this in 1950 is when Roy gets Chattanooga. So they add another, what would be compared to the Tennessee territory, this is another big town. So add this on to Nashville, add this on to booking fees from Knoxville. Now they're going to own and be the primary promoter for Chattanooga, and Nick is going to take that over as well as Nashville. Joe Engel had been a local minor league baseball team owner of the Chattanooga Lookouts, and he ran Chattanooga in the 30s. He vacated the town. Charlie Rentrop, who ran Memphis, took over and had a fellow named Tom Humphreys as his local town promoter. The last half of the 40s, Cowboy Latrell and Don McIntyre bought into the town with a local restaurant owner in Chattanooga, and they tried to run the town and couldn't get anywhere. So when Roy and Nick came in and took over in 1950, wrestling in Chattanooga started exploding. And I don't know, I just wondered to myself, it's kind of curious timing because Roy leaves Tampa and Lake Worth in 49, and Latrell gives up Chattanooga in 50. Could that have had anything to do with one another? I don't know. Possibly. Maybe Ron knows. But you start seeing on the cards, Rowdy Red Roberts, Tex Riley, Corsica Joe, Corsica Gene, Gorgeous George, Vern Gagne, Lou Thez, Danny McShane, Buddy Rogers, Freddie Blassie. All these stars start coming in 1950 in Chattanooga. People are going nuts over this new wrestling that's in town from the Mid-South booking office. And through the 1950s, Chattanooga is drawing in the 3,000 to 3,500 range, which is about 500 to 600 more than Nashville is drawing, which added another big money engine to the office-owned territory towns for Roy. So
do you have that list in front of you, Tony, that you sent us to what the towns were drawing?
Yeah. We're just about to it. So for a period of time there from 1950 to 53, Nashville is the lead town in the home base. Chattanooga is just kind of the second town because that's not where the office is, but in actuality, Chattanooga's outdrawing, and mainly because Nashville's building is limited to 3,000, and Memorial Auditorium in Chattanooga is just a slight bigger to hold another 500 to 1,000 people. So Roy is also sending wrestlers and booking talent to many of the promoters in Louisiana. So he's getting booking fees from the state of Louisiana. Jimmy Thompson in Alexandria, Pauline Kilshaw in Baton Rouge, Gus Callio in Monroe, Louisiana, Ernestine Murtaugh in New Orleans are all getting talent. So now you see why Roy needs guys. Because
now Greenville and all that's separate from those towns.
That's Mississippi. Yeah, that's coming up. You see why Roy needs guys, because he's got now going to start booking cards in Chattanooga. He's booking talent down to Louisiana.
Wow.
He's got to book talent in Knoxville, Tennessee. And in 1953.
So not only is he running a huge territory, he's running a huge booking office where he's sending talent out.
That's right. Yeah. And the booking fees are almost going to match the town promotion towns, because so many of those early towns in the Tennessee Territory, they're small. They're, 15 to 20,000 people. So these Nashvilles and Chattanoogas are coming in. They're huge money engines, plus the booking fees from these other states that he's working in. And in 1953, he buys the license to promote and book wrestling in the entire state of Alabama from Joe Gunther. Joe Gunther had been Chris Jordan's successor. We talked about him. Jordan passed away in 1940. Gunther held on, and actually Gunther worked a lot of events for Roy as a wrestler. Roy had a partner in Birmingham for a little while named Clyde Walker, but he didn't last too long. And then Nick bought out his part of the town in January of 1954. So buying the state of Alabama brought all of Chris Jordan's old towns into the office and into the office bank accounts. Huntsville, Montgomery, Florence, all these other towns are now being promoted by Roy's guys. Mike Maroney, Colonel Herb Langston. He sends Buddy Fuller down to work in Alabama. He sends the Fields boys. Virgil Hatfield relocates to Alabama. This is a bold new frontier for the Welch office. So starting in 1953, Birmingham starts becoming the big town for the office. So it starts replacing Nashville as the biggest money producing town. So from 1953 to 1959, Monday nights in Birmingham would be the biggest night of the week for the wrestling office. So the office and the territory had grown from small towns in the 30s to Nashville being the driving force in the 40s. And now in the 50s, the territory has more A towns for every night of the week. So they got Monday nights in Birmingham drawing 5,000 to 6,000 people every week. They got Tuesdays in Nashville drawing 2,500 to 3,000. Wednesday nights are Kingsport, Tennessee. Not sure what the drawing there was, but Thursday nights is Chattanooga. They're drawing 3,600 to 4,100 people. And Friday nights, they're getting booking fees on Knoxville that's drawing 3,200 to 4,600 people every single week.
Wow. What a great territory that he's built.
Oh, my gosh. Now, I mean, he's got these money-producing towns, every night of the week, Monday through Friday. So then either he takes the Tennessee territory towns, they either become B-show towns during the week or they become spot show towns. So, I mean, and there's no telling how many. I mean, we don't have documentation for all of these shows that they were probably running in these little towns that there's just no telling. I just don't have no idea, how many shows they were running, how many guys there were, how much money they were making, but it had to be huge.
And again, before cell phones, before the internet, I mean, this is a logistic nightmare. Trying to keep up with all this stuff, keep up with all the travel, keep up with everything. You don't have a way to keep up with the guys that are traveling. I mean, this is, they would stop at payphones to call. This is
that's what they did. I remember many times riding with Jack Gott and Leo Voss in Oklahoma, the two main referees there. They'd stop at just about every damn payphone they could to get an update from Leroy what their town was going to do that night.
Wow.
And you can see where Roy's just like, okay, half of you guys, Virgil and your sons and Herb and Jack, everybody to Alabama, because we got a whole state now, so not only do they have, I mean, it's the only state that they have everything.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just amazing the growth and how they were able to manage that stuff. And like we said earlier, Roy had to be a brilliant man. I mean, Helmut and Herb had to be brilliant people.
So they they don't own all of Tennessee because they don't own Knoxville. They get booking fees from it. They send talent to it, but they don't. It's not an office town. They don't own Kingsport and Bristol, Johnson City, because they send talent
Carolina,
there.
is that Carolina running out those towns?
No, that
Okay.
they're running with their own people. George Kazana in Knoxville and Mickey Barnes in Johnson City. They own their own towns. Roy's providing the talent and getting the booking fees, but he doesn't own the town. So he doesn't own all of Tennessee. He doesn't own all of Kentucky. He doesn't own all of Arkansas. But now he owns a whole state. He owns the entire state of Alabama. And so that he sends Buddy Fuller down there to work in Birmingham and Montgomery. He sends Layfield, Virgil's oldest son, Speedy's oldest son, down there to work. 1954, that's when Virgil moves down there. Jack goes down. Jack Welch, the brother, goes down to run as the promoter of Dothan in September of 54.
Now, Jack is a guy that's kind of the unheard of brother most of the time in this story, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why is that? Is Jack just not?
He didn't work a lot of the. He wasn't on top. He worked mid card, or if he worked on top, he worked in a tag match with one of the other brothers. He was a lot more concerned with promotion than working in the ring, and so he goes down to be promoter in Dothan, and then Roy decides to split up the state of Alabama, and the southern part of Alabama from Montgomery down, he decides to make that its own separate loop and its own separate territory. So he sends Buddy down there to run it, and he tells Buddy to be in the Mobile, establish an office in Mobile, Alabama. And Buddy buys a farm there in Loxley, just outside of Mobile, and that's where all the Buddy and the Fuller boys were all raised down there. So kind of an interesting story. In September of 54, Buddy, once he gets to Mobile, he's working with the Shriners, and the wrestling was held at the Shrine Auditorium, and he changed to a building at Fort Whiting because the Shriners organization would not allow black folks to attend the events. And Buddy said, "Okay, well, if you're not going to let them come to the events, then we're moving the wrestling show."
That's
And
one more example how that professional wrestling had helped segregation come about.
Yep. And he never looked back, man. It was a great move because
that is a great move. And Tony, at this time, Roy seems like he's controlling as much territory as probably as anybody in the country, right? Who were the other great promoters? I mean, obviously you had, I believe, Vince Sr. up in New York. You had Al Hafton, the guys up in Chicago. You had the California territories. What were how does he compare to these other guys, and what were like the other two or three major territories?
Jim Crockett Sr. in the Carolinas. He had North, South Carolina, and Virginia. You had Ed McLemore in Dallas. So you had
that's who sold to Fritz.
Yep. Well, they were partners for a while, but then he did sell out to Fritz at the end. You had Morris Siegel in Houston. You had let's see, in 54.
Were the Funks out?
54, that would have been Dory Detton. I think he sold in 54 to Sarpolis. So you had Sarpolis and Funk after 54 in West Texas, which that was a huge geographical territory because it was El Paso and West Texas and New Mexico and up to almost to, and later on would include Denver. So they had portions of Idaho. I mean, that was just a huge. Wow. They actually, which will come into our story in a little while when Buddy goes to Phoenix. So they had Arizona for a little while from 56 to 59. They owned the Tucson and Phoenix and Mesa, Arizona, as part of West Texas as well.
But really, no other promoter in the United States could compare to the empire that
it was. No, because the Welch empire was more densely populated. I mean, there were more people to buy tickets.
Was that West Texas? I grew up in West Texas. That territory out there, that had to be brutal. That had to be worse than the Watts territory with Louisiana as far as travel. Yeah, and from one city to the next, that's a major city, it's hundreds of miles.
And that's why they eventually gave up Arizona, because it was just too far for the guys to travel in a loop to all the way out.
So Roy had the biggest territory, right?
Yeah, it's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. I mean, Birmingham, when he buys Alabama in 53, Birmingham becomes his St. Louis. I mean, it becomes the premier wrestling city. I mean, they've got 8 world title matches. They've got Mildred Burke in there with the title. They got June Byers in there with the women's title. They got Lou Thez in there with the NWA title. The big feud that really set Birmingham in motion was Ray Perrette and Sonny Myers battling over the Southern Junior title. They had Fred Blassie in there with the Southern title, like they did in the other towns. He was
now,
actually.
Fred, let's jump at that familiar name to all of our listeners out there. Freddie Blassie. When you hear that name, you think California and New York. You never think of anything else but Blassie.
He was
Blassie,
huge in Georgia.
That's what I was going to say. When I remember, Blassie was the name in Georgia too for many years.
And he was huge here for Roy. As a matter of fact, he came to Birmingham so much. I mean, he was almost a regular in '55 on the Birmingham Monday Night Show. Baron Leone was was the World Junior title holder for the NWA. He came in. Ed Francis came in, defended that title as well. I think twice for Leone and 3 times for Ed Francis.
Now, Ed Francis, was that Bill Francis' dad?
Dad.
The guy who was the Hall of Fame terrific football player for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yep, he was the NWA World Junior
His dad promoted Hawaii for so many years.
Yeah, 50th State Wrestling. Thez faced Blassie one time in Birmingham and Wild Bill Longson in the other. Gorgeous George was in there. So was Antonino Rocca. It was just amazing how on fire Birmingham was at this time frame.
And Tony, you probably help me out on this. So what I'm finding is, a lot of territories had competition all the time, but was it just the power that the Welches had that kept everybody out of there?
Yeah, it was amazing. They would find like these places like this that would fit like a puzzle piece into what they were already doing, and there was either wrestling hadn't been presented there the way they could present it there, or the promoter was weak or something, and they could go in there and fans just went crazy over that Southern style they presented. It was.
Did they ever go in and hotshot it to take over territory, or was the places?
No, not really. They either bought it or it was dark or.
So they weren't really aggressors or anything like that.
No, but once they got in there, I mean, no one thought anything about taking them on. I mean, it was that. Those guys went to Nashville and took them on. They lasted 3 months. Now, later on, when we get into other episodes down the road, they are going to have some competition, and some of it comes from inside, and some of it comes from outside. Yeah. So that'll be interesting when we get there. One of those, Lou Thez, is a part of one of the competitors. Right.
Yeah. And that's a forgotten story too.
1955. So he's on a roll. 1955, he buys the state of Mississippi booking rights, another whole state. So he buys those from Billy Romanoff. He picks up the booking and the promotion for Jackson, Vicksburg, Greenville, Greenwood. And he didn't really keep these towns. And like you said, it's a logistical nightmare. Just to get guys in all these towns from a booking standpoint.
Folks were telling you, and I was actually experiencing right after this, that there were no interstates during that time. So not only were there very limited air travel, there's no interstate travel at all.
I mean, besides the booking and the logistics and the schedules and all that, from a promotion standpoint, it was tripled hard because the ticket sales and coordinate all that and finding a good town promoter and all that. Roy didn't really stay as the promoter. He kept booking talent into Mississippi. Another thing that he did was, well, first of all, let me say this. Billy Romanoff's territory that he bought in Mississippi was perfect for him, and mainly because Romanoff presented junior heavyweights, just like Roy. But he tended to hold on to guys for too long. He didn't really know when programs had run their course and fans got burned out on it or whatever. Roy can come in and present it. He's got so many guys, he can continue to roll in and keep everything fresh. But it was just perfect for him as far as something to add on to his territory, because Roy had always booked light heavyweights, and Romanoff had never been an NWA member. So when Roy took over in February of 55, his mixture of, like, let's say 70% light heavyweights and 30% heavyweights was just wonderful. And all of a sudden, all of these fans were seeing, well, let me just run down. So in Mississippi, they were seeing Roy Welch, Herb Welch, Lester Welch, Buddy Fuller. They were seeing Lee and Bobby and Don Fields. And then they were seeing big-time heel Mario Galinto. They were seeing Baron Michelle Leone, Sonny Myers, Eddie Red Roberts, Rube Wright, Ali Pasha, Eddie Gossett, Pat Malone, Charlie Keene, Jack Curtis Jr., and women wrestlers and little guy wrestlers and all that, mixed it in with some guys that had worked for Romanoff before, like Rex Mobley, Danny Dusick, Charlie Lay, some of those guys. And all of a sudden, Mississippi fans were going, holy cow, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So when Roy kind of chopped off the bottom half of Alabama and told Buddy, I want you to go to Mobile, and I want you to create a territory in Mobile and run that. Well, then when he bought the booking rights for Mississippi, then in the Gulf Coast territory, which was Mobile, Buddy got Biloxi, he got Gulfport, he got Hattiesburg, he got Laurel, all in his loop for Mobile. And he did some spot shows in some other Mississippi towns, but it doubled the size of that small territory in South Alabama just because Roy had the booking rights to Mississippi.
And when, this may be a tease for next week, but when did Roy get TV?
Coming. Are you ready? Can we?
You want to hit it, or you want to wait for next week?
Yeah, let's hit
it. You want to hit it? Okay, let's hit it. Tony.
Well, I don't know. What do you guys?
Well, we could, Jerry. We're right at a little over 2 hours, so maybe we start next week.
Let's hit TV and set it up for next week out of TV.
Yeah. So is there a setup that you need, Tony, for next week?
Are we going to do it today, or are we going to wait till next week?
Let's wait till next week.
Okay.
Does that work?
Let me get this in, and this will be a good way to close. So 1956, the town of Memphis is being booked by the St. Louis Wrestling Club, which is Sam Mushnick's office. It's owned by Les Wolf. And in June of 1957, Les Wolf sells his promotional rights to the city of Memphis to Nick and Roy's Nashville office. And that is a good place to start, because wrestling in Memphis is pretty much dead, and Nick and Roy are going to bring Memphis, Tennessee into the fold here in June of 57, which is pretty good timing because they're in the TV business for about a year when that happens. And they're becoming really, really masters of television for the time as well. And we will talk about that next week.
I want to ask one last question from me. It's Les Wolf. There was the wrestler. Is that the wrestler Les Wolf?
Years ago.
Was he the one that owned Memphis, though?
Yes, and he was in close with Avey and McGurk. And I
knew him back in the day, too. Wow, I'm old.
Yeah, and
I was telling somebody the other day, I was watching an Oklahoma State wrestling match. One of the wrestlers for Oklahoma State, I played football with his granddad. Holy cow, you're old.
But Wolf was very closely aligned with Avey and Wolf, or Avey and McGurk. But which is, I'll just say this and then we'll move on. But it's the interesting thing about Memphis is that, and we talk about Roy coming in and taking over towns, he never tried to take over Memphis, which was curious to me, because the way Roy would come into a town like he did Nashville was with junior heavyweights. And the junior heavyweights weren't really present in Memphis. And when the Tulsa office was booking, they were just booking heavyweights in there. And the Tulsa office was known for junior heavyweights.
Right. Yeah.
But Roy never tried to come in there.
Roy, Danny, and Brisco, yeah.
Roy never tried to come in there and run a second group with light heavyweights in Memphis. And I don't know why. Maybe Ron knows. But so when Roy and Nick buy Memphis, that town is ready, just like Birmingham, just like these other towns. It's ready for something new, something different, and Roy's got the prescription for it.
And that's what we'll pick up next time.
Wow.